Have you ever felt overwhelmed by stress and wondered how best to cope with it? In this video, I'm going to explain first the difference between a stressor and stress. Second, when stress helps and when it hinders. And third, what the human function curve is and how to best cope with stress based on where you're at on that curve. One of the first things to start with is a better understanding of a stressor versus stress. So a stressor is something that is placing demand upon us. It's typically an external thing that is requiring something of us. It could be a challenge, it could be a physical load we have to carry, it could be a cognitive concern that we have to problem solve or think through. And so a stressor is demanding something of us. Stress is our response to that. And based on what the stressor is, how demanding it is, the toll it takes upon us, we may have a stronger stress response. And that's a critical distinction. In between the stressor and stress, there's also some perception and interpretation that goes on. So if we can improve the way we view the stressor, that will significantly change the stress response that comes from it. So as an example, let's say you have a big test coming up and it's worth a large percentage of your grade, and that is the stressor that you're dealing with. There are various ways you could interpret that would affect the stress response you'll have. Some researchers, Lazarus and Folkman, identified two different appraisals that we may have of the stressor itself that will then determine how much stress we experience or the type of stress. So they found that one of the first appraisals we make is how significant, how challenging, how threatening is the stressor. So in this case, as you review that, you may realize, okay, it's 100 questions, it's worth 30% of my grade. Yes, it's a big deal. This is a significant thing. It's worth a lot. Definitely something that's demanding. Maybe there's a limited time to take it. 100 questions, you only have 45 minutes. And so you know a lot's being asked of you. The stressor is real. But they also identified a second appraisal that can change the level of stress, right? So if that was the stressor and it was worth that much of your grade, that's going to create tremendous stress. Okay? But if in the second appraisal, which is kind of an inventory of the resources you have to cope with that stressor, if you realize, hey, I've always done well in tests in the past, I've gotten A's in all the other assignments, I have such a high grade in this class that actually I don't even have to pass this test to still get a decent grade. I've got a TA I can talk to, the professors want to meet with me and help me prepare for this. And, I'm well rested and I know if I eat well, then I'll knock this out of the park like I have every other test, right? If that's your secondary appraisal, all these external and internal resources that are going to help you manage this significant challenge very well, likely actually you won't experience that much distress from the stressor because you're seeing it in a very different way and you're connecting with more resources to cope with it. So when you're dealing with something really big, that's one significant suggestion is, yes, be honest about how important it is, how significant it is, how much it's going to demand of you. But second, do a very careful inventory of all the resources that will help you manage it well. As another example, if I was in the woods and I see a bear start coming towards me, my first appraisal would be, how dangerous is this bear? Is it a black bear? Is it a grizzly bear? Is it hungry? Is it running? Is it targeting me specifically? Are there its babies around? Is it angry? And all that's happening very rapidly, and that of course may lead to quite a bit of stress. And yet, if I can do a quick secondary appraisal, I may realize, okay, there's still, a few hundred yards in between us. And what, my vehicle is right there. I can step into my vehicle, lock the door, kind of back away if I need to. If I realize I even have that one resource right there, I may not panic. I may say, you know what, this is definitely kind of a dangerous situation, but I have a quick escape. I can get safely in my vehicle, and then your stress level may come down dramatically, right? Just by identifying one resource that will help you cope with it well. So that's the first concept. The second thing that I've already hinted at is that stress isn't all bad, right? There's eustress, which is actually helpful stress that helps us prepare and get ready and harness all of our resources to do our best when we're facing a challenge. And then there's distress, which is when stress can become too heavy and overwhelming, and then it starts to actually impair our thinking and our physical functioning. And so a certain level of stress is actually healthy and necessary for us to have purpose and meaning in life, to have a reason to wake up in the morning and to get going. A certain level of challenge or stress is required for anything that we accomplish, right? There's usually something required of us, some demand, if we're going to achieve and grow and develop. And so this leads us to the next concept. Helpful stress versus unhelpful stress can be explained well based on the human function curve. So I'm going to draw this out for you. So the human function curve is a relationship between how much challenge or stress we're experiencing and our overall functioning. And what we find is quite interesting, actually, and maybe is even counterintuitive until you think it through. So we find that actually at very low levels of stress, our overall functioning can be quite low. Why do you think that would be? If it's a summer morning, you wake up and you have absolutely nothing to do, the calendar is clear, is it possible that you might just roll back over in bed and sleep for a few more hours? There's no stress, there's no challenge, there's nothing to get up for, and so you may not do much that day. Your functioning may be very minimal, your accomplishments, your productivity. And it's interesting that at that very low end of the human function curve, very low stress and very low functioning, it's not necessarily a pleasant place to be. It may be for a few days or even a week if we're on vacation to have low demands, lay out on the beach, soak up the sun, and just, recover from a busy schedule. But if that goes on forever, right? How fun is the beach going to be if you're only sitting there for months? It may feel quite boring, and you may find that it's no longer rejuvenating, it's no longer fun. And what can happen is what we call boredom depression. So there's not enough challenge, there's not enough activity, there's not enough connection, there's not enough reward in your life at that very low level of stress. There's a certain level of stress demand that's placed upon us to get out there and live life and to engage in healthy activities and relationships and to meet our biopsychosocial spiritual needs. We actually have to get up and get going and do things and to accomplish and to connect and to meet our needs for connection and for growth and for contribution and for structure and for variety and for esteem and competence, and all these great things come actually at moderate levels of stress. So this human function curve shows that actually it's at the moderate level of stress, even sometimes moderate to high, that we start to function at our best, we start to be more productive, and we actually can thrive. There's this peak, right? This climax where we're actually quite challenged and we're thriving, flourishing. So we have just the right amount of demand placed upon us and the right level of preparation. And it's this peak, it's this sweet spot where we're just rocking it, right? It's kind of like a wave. We're surfing at the top of the wave, and we can experience something called flow, right? This peaceful and sometimes even euphoric experience when everything's coming together because of our preparation and because of high level of challenge that's pushing us to kind of the next level. We're in the zone, we're playing out of our mind, sometimes they say, and it can be quite wonderful. So we don't want to shy away from stress. We want to embrace and appreciate moderate, high levels of stress that are just required to live and to meet needs and to be productive and to enjoy all that life has to offer. And yet, as we look at this human function curve, you can see that after this peak, there's a falling off that happens, sometimes quite quickly. And this is where the demands placed upon us get so heavy for so long that they start to weigh us down. And they start to make it hard to enjoy life. It's like if you're backpacking and you have 30 pounds in your backpack, you may have all the gear you need to get up to that beautiful mountain lake, have a wonderful time, do some fishing, sleep warmly, have all the food you need, maybe some games you can play with friends or family. But what if you had 300 pounds in your backpack? Now it's different, right? Now, instead of a moderate level of stress, or weight placed upon you, now it's almost unbearable, right? You can't even stand up straight anymore. You're laying on the ground with this weight on your back. You're dragging yourself through the dust. You can't see the views. You're not making much progress. you're frustrated, and it's overwhelming, and your functioning is completely has completely plummeted. And so 300 versus 30 makes all the difference. Moderate stress to extreme high stress can determine whether we have a great experience versus we're miserable. And I've heard people say this, when they get a little too far on that right side of the human function curve. I don't get it. I'm like struggling so much, and I'm anxious, and I'm depressed, but everything's good in my life, right? Like the 2 jobs I'm doing is good, and all my relationships are good, and all these places where I'm volunteering are great things, and my big yard that I'm taking care of, and my huge house that I have to take care of, and all my vehicles, like it's all good stuff. And yet too much good stuff, too many demands, too many things we're responsible for can make it to where we still can't enjoy our life. It's just too heavy. We can't enjoy life if we're dragging ourselves through the dirt, or if we're just too busy that we have to rush past everything and can't actually stop and absorb the goodness of those experiences and those relationships. And so it's really critical to find the sweet spot, right? That moderate to high level of challenge or demand in our life that isn't excessive and extreme and overwhelming. And so some of the early warning signs that we're getting too far on the right side could be, what do you think? It's a little different for everyone, but you may start to feel a little more irritable, and it may start to affect your sleep. You may feel more tired, have headaches, have a harder time eating. You may start to notice more worry. It's harder to control your worries. You may have a harder time concentrating. You may start to get sick more easily, physically sick. You may notice that there's more strain in your relationships, that you're not excited. You lose some of your motivation to do the basic tasks of your day-to-day, right? You're so weighed down, these things aren't fun anymore, right? It's just too heavy. You're too tired all the time to actually enjoy these experiences. And that can start to lead to not just worry, but anxiety, quite severe anxiety. I just can't do this anymore. I can't get this all done. This is too much. And you start to notice maybe consequences when things are getting left undone. And then at even a deeper level, it can lead to depression. And we call this depletion depression. I just have had so much I've had to do for so long. It's been so heavy that I'm just worn out. I'm just tired. Life's not fun. And I'm kind of sick of this. And it can lead to even hopelessness. Like, I don't even enjoy life anymore. It appears to have all these wonderful aspects, and yet none of it is enjoyable anymore because it's too much. And so what's the solution, right, on this end of the human function curve? Well, it's to pull back a bit. It's to delegate a bit. It's to try to reduce some of these demands. It's to simplify life. So sometimes less is actually much more, if having less allows us to enjoy the experiences without being so heavy and weighed down all the time. And so maybe you drop a class if you're in college. Maybe you cut back on some of your hours of work. Maybe you let go of one of your volunteer opportunities. Maybe you simplify, how you clean your house or how you eat. And maybe you then can free up more time for things that will actually build your resiliency, more time for sleep, more time to eat sufficiently, to exercise, to burn off some stress, to seek social support. And then that can help you get back on the effective side of the human function curve where you're thriving and flourishing. We kind of skipped over solution if you're too far on the left side of the human function curve, where there's not enough challenge or stress, where you might have, let's say, boredom depression. What's the solution on that side? You actually want to increase the challenge, the activities, the relationships in your life. You might be socially isolated. You might be too inactive. And there's just not much reward. There's not much zest, vitality in your life. So of course you may not, you may start to feel depressed or not feel like there's a lot that life has to offer. So how do you fix that? You do something we call behavioral activation. You start to do more activities that are rewarding. You start to seek out relationships that are rewarding, and you engage more in life. And that engagement will bring a fulfillment of all sorts of needs. You'll start to meet your need for connection and companionship. Your need for growth will start to come back and be satisfied. Your need for contribution can be satisfied. Your need for structure, right, and routine can be met. For esteem, right, you feel like you have more worth because you're out there, you're connecting, you belong, you're needed, you're doing things, you're part of a community. And things get better and better and better, right? And you kind of build back up to that moderate level of stress and challenge and demand in life that's really healthy. Another way to think about it is astronauts in space. Like, they have almost no demand on their bodies. Is that good for them in the long run? It's actually not. Floating around without using your muscles leads to atrophy of those muscles. is very problematic. You have to be very careful if you spend too much time in space, unless you figure out ways to exercise up there. And I think now I imagine they have equipment to do that. But we need demands of stress placed upon our bodies and our brains to be healthy. We need to use our brain. Our brain tends to get very anxious and depressed when it's not actively being used for good causes. When our brain isn't pursuing things that have meaning and value, it tends to move towards focusing on things that are negative, right? We have this negativity bias where when there's quiet moments and not much to do, we can quickly go towards what's the threat, what's coming up next, what's out there to harm me. And we may find our brain spending a lot of time thinking about all the things that can harm me, even if none of them currently are, if it's not engaged in valuable, healthy activities and relationships. And so engaging in healthy activities and relationships isn't just a way to run away from the negativity in our brain. It's a way to actually meet our psychological needs, right? So it's not an escape mechanism. It's a way to direct our brain towards doing something that will positively influence the quality of our life, improving our relationships, meeting our biopsychosocial needs, being part of a community. And so I hope this is helpful as a way to understand that we could be depressed for two very different reasons. And if it's because of social isolation, inactivity, if we're on this far left side of the human function curve, what we may need to do is actually increase the demands in our life, engage more, take on more, and we may find that we start to meet more of those needs and feel more fulfilled and start to thrive. If we're on the far right and we're doing too much for too long, it's too heavy, and we're depleted and exhausted and burnout, and of course it's the opposite. Let's pull back, let's simplify, let's delegate, let's seek more support. Let's get back to doing things that build our resiliency, sleeping well, eating well, exercising, seeking social support, taking appropriate breaks, finding that healthy balance. And then we're in that happy medium. We're in a great place. A lot of mental health is about balance, finding that middle ground. And in every phase of our life, things can get bumped a bit, and it's going to take effort, right, to realign and find that healthy balance where we're surfing the wave, not getting crushed by the wave. I hope this is helpful as a way to think about how to manage stress, whether we want to actually add more stress, more eustress to our life, or if we need to reduce distress based on demands. But in the end, stress isn't necessarily good or bad. It's just a response we have to challenges, and the way we interpret it, and then the way we manage it and keep it at a moderate level is what will help us have a rich, rewarding life and be mentally stable and thrive. All right, hope that was helpful. Have a wonderful week.